Good evening, America. Happy Monday. Welcome to the latest and very busy edition of Just the News, No Noise. We got a lot of news for you tonight. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to, as always, from the nation's capital and the WiredToFishCoffee.com studios. Wired to Fish Coffee, you know this is the official coffee of Just the News. It's my favorite coffee. I just had a cup before it came on set. You can go right now to WiredToFishCoffee.com. That's Wired, the number 2, FishCoffee.com. Get a fantastic 10% discount on all of their great blends and the Just the News tumbler. Go check that out. All you got to do is use the promo code JustNews at checkout. All right. The theme of tonight's show is accountability, and we are starting to get some recently. Our new reporting up at justthenews.com says that the FBI has opened what they are calling a grand conspiracy probe on the weaponization of government and the Department of Justice, dealing with everything from the Russian collusion hoax back in 2016 right up to Jack Smith's antics nearly a decade later. It will be investigated as a possible ongoing criminal conspiracy. A lot of things happen with that. Now, the investigation was opened several weeks ago by FBI Director Kash Patel, and now it might get a big-time boost from President Trump. They need him to declassify tranches of evidence that could signal how the 2016 Russia collusion conspiracy started. We're going to try to see if we can get President Trump on the show tomorrow night. We'll keep you posted on that. Now, remember Hillary Clinton's classified email server? That's what the first piece of evidence is related to, a classified annex to the Inspector General's probe of the Clinton email server. Now, apparently, that annex is said to show some wrongdoing was done, but it was ignored by the FBI. They didn't look at it. We'll have a guest on later in the show that can help us understand what that's all about. The second tranche of evidence also deals with Hillary Clinton, and it was identified by former Russiagate Special Counsel John Durham. It was placed in a classified annex also. It was dubbed in Durham's report the Clinton Plan Intelligence. So the central question is twofold. What did the government know about how Russiagate started? And when did they know it? Because if they knew it wasn't credible, that Hillary Clinton was behind it and it was just a dirty trick, and they started to investigate it anyways, it's going to be a big problem, a big part of that conspiracy. The ball is now in Attorney General Pam Bondi's court. She can decide to appoint a special prosecutor on this, and if she does and treats it like an ongoing conspiracy, the statute of limitation for old crimes goes away, and she can impanel a grand jury in a place like Florida, not District of Columbia. Why? Because Jack Smith raided President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. So that'll be a big advantage for the prosecution. We'll keep you up to date on all of that at justthenews.com on these breaking topics and talking about all of it in a few minutes with Senator Ron Johnson, our first guest. Now, a quick note on a story I first mentioned right here on Friday night when I revealed FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino taking a few days off to contemplate whether he might want to quit after a Jeffrey Epstein documents feud with the Attorney General Pam Bondi. I predicted Friday cooler heads might prevail with the time off, and just a little while ago I confirmed that happened. Bongino returned to work, and he's got no plans to leave. All right, time to bring in my amazing co-host Amanda Head. Amanda, what are the headlines you're watching for us today?
Lordy, John, you covered a lot, but
we did cover a lot.
Let's talk about Ukraine, the other big story today, because the president spoke a lot about it today with NATO Secretary Mark Rutte, and it seems that President Vladimir Putin of Russia is not playing very nice with President Trump, and the plan involves the United States sending more weapons to Ukraine, but it won't be how the government typically has done it before. Now the U.S. will sell weapons to other European nations, and then these countries can and will transfer them over to Ukraine. And he also has a deadline for Russia. He is giving them 50 days to reach an agreement to end the war with Ukraine, or he is set to impose what the president calls severe tariffs on Russia at a rate of 100%, severe indeed. And the president also revealed that he felt he had a deal in place with Putin about 3 or 4 times, but those deals kept falling through. And we have more big Supreme Court news for you again today, and this ruling will continue to help President Trump shrink the size of government. The court ruled today to allow President Trump to fire hundreds of employees over at the Department of Education, and they had to issue that ruling because of a previous ruling by a federal judge in Massachusetts who decided that those laid-off workers had to be reinstated. And it now looks like President Trump's goal of shutting down the Department of Education could become a reality, or at least shrinking it. John, I think it's time we get to our first guest, because I know he's got a lot to say about your story.
Big news with the Supreme Court. President keeps winning there, and the government's going to keep shrinking as a result of it. All right, a little while ago, we had a chance to speak to the man who found some of the very first Russia collusion evidence. It was those text messages between the lovebirds, Pete Strzok, and his lawyer friend. It was Senator Ron Johnson, right? Lisa Page. Senator Ron Johnson spent some time with us. Listen what he had to say. Joining us now, a man who's been at the forefront of trying to finally get Americans out of accountability, whether it's in the medical community, the FBI, or in the assassination and Secret Service records. He represents the great state of Wisconsin. He's the chairman of the most powerful investigative body in the Senate. He is Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, great to have you back on the show.
Well, John, hello, Amanda. Hope you're doing well.
We are, sir. I want to ask you about this story we wrote about this morning. The FBI a few weeks ago opened a grand conspiracy probe looking at the entire last decade, from Hillary Clinton being cleared to Jack Smith pursuing Donald Trump, as one ongoing conspiracy to hijack the powers of the government, weaponize them against one side, and protect the other side, even when they had criminal liability. Your thoughts on that approach and whether it lends itself to a special prosecutor?
Well, John, I don't know what your thoughts are, but you know as much about this as I do, and I've felt these people are criminals for many years now. I mean, the fact that they knew this was the whole Russian Gate was a conspiracy hatched by the Clinton campaign back in 2016. The President Obama was briefed on that. I mean, they all knew. The fact that in Michael Horowitz's Inspector General report on the FISA abuse, that under a redacted footnote, totally contradicted what was in the body of the report, that the FBI knew that, for example, one of the sources of the Steele dossier was somebody they were investigating as a Russian spy. Again, they knew all these things. So how they could move forward with the multi-million-dollar Robert Mueller special counsel investigation, I mean, they put America through unbelievable, really historic political turmoil, knowing that the entire narrative was completely false. So, you follow that all the way through to the 50 plus intelligence officials claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop was, had all the earmarks of Russian information campaign, when they had to know, because the FBI had possession of that computer, that no, it was a real computer, it had real information on it. So again, when you've been at the heart of these investigations like you and I have, again, I've just viewed these people as criminal for years.
Yeah.
Senator, as John laid out in his reporting, and the left protects their own, and people like Hillary Clinton at the inception of this possible conspiracy, operated with impunity, it seems like. So the left is going to fight back tooth and nail. What does that look like in the face of multiple different venues, multiple different investigators, multiple different possible crimes? How do they fight back against that?
Well, again, I thought John Durham seemed to be a pretty honorable investigator. But we were always told that he's only going to indict if he believes he can get a conviction, and his venue for indicting would be D.C. And I think he realized it's impossible to get conviction against a Democrat politician when you've got 90% plus of the D.C. jury pool, pretty strongly Democrat supporters. So you can convict somebody, a Republican, people like the Trump administration officials that actually went to jail, but you can't lay a hand on a Democrat. So I've always suspected that John Durham probably had the goods to indict, but he just simply wouldn't do it because he knew he couldn't convict in D.C.
Yeah. Well, one of the things being discussed in this plan is to move this to Florida, where Jack Smith operated for quite a few times, and view that as part of the conspiracy, raiding Mar-a-Lago, things like that. Does a venue change potentially change the picture for prosecutors and what they could potentially accomplish? And then also, you mentioned both Durham and Horowitz, the two guys. There are classified annexes to the reports that have been secret for 8 years. I know you would like to see them declassified, but President Trump, get your thoughts on that as well.
And he probably should. I believe I've seen one of those annexes. Again, when you see this stuff, it's like, what do you try and protect? I mean, they always say sources and methods, and I generally just roll my eyes at that. So anyway, I do believe, and I said this from the minute I heard that they may be investigating this, is unless you have a change in venue, it probably doesn't make any sense to investigate, kind of a John Durham approach. If all you're going to do is investigate, and then this is DC's your venue, don't even waste your time. Except for the fact I do believe the first step in political accountability is exposure, and it might be worth just exposing all of this. But as I said earlier, we've known about this. I mean, this has been exposed. It's been out in the public domain. Of course, the corporate, the legacy media doesn't report on it, but we've known about the corruption of people like John Brennan, of James Comey, these other individuals, the corrupt actors, Hillary Clinton. These are corrupt, bad people that, unfortunately, because they're radical leftists, they're Democrats, they by and large get a pass in the mainstream media.
Yeah. True.
Senator, it does kind of feel like we are in our revelatory era. A lot of things being uncovered thanks to you and other folks on Capitol Hill. But with respect to Joe Biden's mental state during his presidency, a lot of people finally feeling liberated to speak out and talk about it. And the latest is that Joe Biden, in fact, did know about each of those pardons, whether they were signed with auto pen or not. Is that the threshold that a president just knows about it?
Well, probably in case of the auto pen, it probably is. I mean, if he says that he knew all about these things, just direct his people to use the auto pen, I think that that issue probably goes away. What doesn't go away is what the cabinet officers, what the people around him knew, because many of them swore an oath to the Constitution to defend it, to uphold it. And part of the Constitution is the 25th Amendment. And so we are diligently going about our investigation, first on a volunteer basis. We've conducted our first transcribed interviews with a cabinet official. The rest of the cabinet seems to be on vacation through August. So, okay. To me, this has historical significance. We need to interview people in the cabinet. Based on those interviews, we'll find out who else we want to interview. This is a serious investigation. Interviews being transcribed, eventually available for public review and the historical record. So I'm conducting a serious investigation. We're going to pursue it doggedly. Just talk to my staff about it. Again, I'm not looking for a show trial here. I'm looking for the historical record in terms of what these people knew, when they knew it, what discussions they had amongst themselves in terms of really the competency, the capability of President Biden when he was in office.
Yeah. Is there something else that you've worked tirelessly on? And I know you just issued subpoenas for this. The evidence surrounding the assassination attempt of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. So many questions unanswered. Your reports have given us more than anyone. What is it do you think you may find? Is it the possibility of other conspirators or people aiding? What are you looking for in these next round of subpoenas to give us, the American public, a more full accounting of what happened that day?
Well, first of all, I view this as a friendly subpoena, not an adversarial one, just to prompt transparency. Now, the assumption I had, my staff uncovered an awful lot just talking to local law enforcement within the week or two afterwards. But then local law enforcement clammed up, probably under the direction of the FBI. FBI conducted hundreds of interviews. We were able to talk to maybe a couple dozen Secret Service people, kind of given to us, drip, drip, drip. We requested their notes, the 302s on those FBI interviews. We'd like to see the body cam video. We'd like to see the cameras from cars. We want to see all that evidence. The American people has a right to see this. My assumption when President Trump got elected is that once in office, he would appoint people in the Justice Department and the FBI that would conduct a very thorough investigation, realizing they have far more investigatory tools and personnel than we have. And we'd have a report by now. I guess the anniversary kind of snuck up on me and realized, man, we just haven't learned that much more since our initial preliminary report based on those first investigations. So I issued the subpoena in a friendly manner just to get everybody's attention, go, guys, it is time to let the American people know what you know. I'm hoping it's viewed that way. I want to be cooperative, but listen, we're a year down. We don't know who Thomas Crooks was. We don't know his motivation. There's just so much that we still don't know that we probably should know.
Yeah.
Senator, before we let you go, the overarching agency who should have overseen protection of the president that day was the United States Secret Service, but there are at least half a dozen other agencies who are drawn into this protection plan. Do you anticipate, I guess I'm asking what your gut is. Does it seem like it's incompetence, or does it seem like it could lead somewhere more sinister?
Well, certainly under Joe Biden, I think it was incompetent. I think it was incompetent because of their DEI measures, and they're concerned more about, what an agent looked like than the agent's competency. And listen, I also understand President Trump. Anybody who's been protected by the Secret Service has a great affinity and, quite honestly, love and respect for those agents that are willing to literally lay down their life to protect the protectee's life. So, I understand the reluctance of really looking at this too close, but it's people in upper management. It's for example, President Biden, who did not provide the kind of resources, direct the Secret Service to provide the resources to protect candidate Trump at that point in time. In the end, it's really President Biden's responsibility, and I think he failed.
Yeah. So I would be remiss not to remind the audience, it was your hard work that gave us the Pete Strzok, Lisa Page text messages and the admission that there was no big there. That was really the turning point in the news media, I think, accepting that maybe the Russia collusion investigation was a hoax. You've done such extraordinary work, and you deserve a lot of credit for where these investigations are today. Really great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for all your hard work and efforts as well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Great conversation. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to go down to Arizona. Congressman Abe Hamadeh made some news today. He called for the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, to step down. We'll ask him about that and also his take on the FBI opening up a grand conspiracy investigation after these messages. We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. As we celebrate America's birthday, it's a great time to reflect on the facts. And here's one that really matters. The freedoms that we enjoy today didn't happen by accident. They were built on the foundation of faith, family, hard work, and individual liberty. But those values don't protect themselves. They need people like you and me to stand up for them. And that's why I want to encourage you to join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC is working every day to defend the principles that made this country great. And right now, in honor of Independence Day, you can get 5 full years of AMAC membership for just $35. It's an incredible opportunity to stay informed with their magazine, access exclusive discounts, free resources, and most importantly, stand with millions of other Americans who believe in protecting this nation's future. So go to amac.us/justnews right now and join this July. Give America the gift of more patriots standing up for her. Welcome back, everybody. As you heard before the break and as we've been discussing all of the show so far, it looks like the deep state might finally get a little bit of a dose of accountability. Anyone else deserving of it in Washington? Well, maybe Fed Chair Jerome Powell. President Trump certainly thinks so. And joining us now to speak on both of those topics, he represents the great state of Arizona, Congressman Abe Hamadeh. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you.
Sir, a grand conspiracy that spans, for all of us who have been in politics, a decade ago, it seems like ages ago, with the Hillary Clinton email probe. We all remember watching on that fateful day. Was it the day before 4th of July or after the 4th of July when James Comey said, oh, no, we're not going to do anything. And spanning basically all the way up to present day. Maybe I'm blackpilled a little, but you know all of the inner workings of Washington. Do you think that we could finally see some accountability at this point?
Well, if you remember that infamous meeting on the tarmac actually happened in Phoenix, Arizona with the Attorney General and Bill Clinton. And so hopefully there's accountability. It seems like the Republicans are motivated right now to actually bring accountability because we have the levers of power and just the sheer number of documents that are being uncovered. So far, it seems like the American people have woken up a lot to what the fake news media has been spewing for the past 10 years. And we have to have justice because so many people in this movement, they supported President Trump back in 2016 on that idea of holding the powerful accountable. And it seems like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and so many of these Democrats constantly get away with it. And what we have now with a strong FBI director and with President Trump at the helm, it seems like there's going to be finally justice coming.
Yeah, so important. I want to get to that incredible letter you wrote today calling for the Fed chairman to resign. Before we do, I just want to ask quickly, one idea that's out there now is to move this to a special prosecutor, perhaps the venue of Florida where the Mar-a-Lago raid and other things occurred. Do you like the idea of a special prosecutor, given how expansive this potential conspiracy case could be?
Well, I haven't read through it to see whether a special prosecutor is warranted or not. I have full confidence in the Trump Department of Justice. So I have to assess it more fully and whether to see it's going to be beneficial. And I don't want to spend more resources on something if there's not going to be actual results being done on it. So I know I have confidence in Kash Patel and Trump's DOJ, but I have to first figure out what the special prosecutor would entail and what their actual scope would be. But obviously, making sure that we have accountability is important. But what mechanism to do that is something that I'm going to be working on.
Great.
Congressman, I want to move to the Fed issue. President Trump's economy this time around, it seems to be coming back on a lot of different metrics, but it seems like he blames the decisions made by the Fed, notably Jerome Powell, for any type of drawing down on that, anything that's possibly holding it back. Do you agree? And do you think that Jerome Powell is feeling the heat and therefore might step down?
He should feel the heat because for too long, I've been talking to so many Arizonans and so many young people, they can no longer afford a home. It's actually so sad what's happening. If you see the average age of a first-time homeowner, it has skyrocketed to over 40 years old. And something that President Trump actually just proposed, I believe, yesterday, which was eliminating capital gains, that would help spur up the economy. And what Jerome Powell is doing with the as chairman of the Federal Reserve by not lowering interest rates has been a huge hindrance on home ownership. And it seems that Jerome Powell's actions, he's looking at the tariff policy. He thought it was going to have a negative impact, but instead what we saw just last month in June, we saw that the Treasury Department actually had a revenue increase of $27 billion due to President Trump's successful tariff strategy. And I think that's what's so important for Americans to realize. President Trump has a strategy in everything he's doing. He's a successful businessman. He's been president before. He knows the psychology of the leaders of these countries. And what we have is a Federal Reserve chairman who's in charge of monetary policy. And he's effectively curtailing the successes of bringing in this golden age era that President Trump wants to usher in. And on top of that, you have Jerome Powell just a few weeks ago talk about the renovations at the Federal Reserve building, $2.5 billion, $700 million over budget for a building here in Capitol, in the steps of the Capitol, right across the National Mall. It is despicable to see the gross mismanagement of funds that the Federal Reserve Chairman has been doing. So I believe I think he can be fired for cause at this point. So I think President Trump has the ability and the scope of powers to actually fire Jerome Powell. I am calling for him to resign before his May 2026 period is up.
Yeah. Reading your letter and listening to you talk, one of the things that is really become apparent to a lot of the economists I talk to in Washington is that the Fed is actually afraid of growth. Like they try to suppress it and tap it so it doesn't get too large. We're at a moment where this economy could burst out and the Fed just seems afraid to let that happen. What's the mindset that leaves the Federal Reserve afraid to let this economy reach its full potential?
I think they're not used to innovative type of thinking. So for too long, the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve has been trying to manage a broken system. And unfortunately, right now you have Jerome Powell who's actively getting in the way of that. President Trump is bringing such novel new ideas into trying to bring back prosperity to our country by having, I mean, if you look at the amount of trillions of dollars coming into the United States of foreign direct investments, this is something that's unheard of in past administrations. In Arizona here, we have TSMC, the largest semiconductor microchip manufacturing in the world coming there. They're spending over $150 billion. So there's a lot of money being poured into the system. And unfortunately, what we have is a Federal Reserve Chairman with Jerome Powell, who's not able to respond appropriately. So it seems like he's playing political games, to be honest with you. And I think that's the biggest worry that I have. And that's why I called for his resignation. I'm talking to some of my colleagues on Capitol Hill. There's a huge movement and a push right now, not just in the House, but also in the Senate, to hopefully push Jerome Powell out, because if he continues to stay as the chairman without lowering interest rates, it's having a devastating toll on the economy. We need to make sure that we are keeping pace with President Trump, because President Trump is moving at lightning speed, and we need to have the Federal Reserve to be able to catch up with that.
Yeah, great point.
Congressman, I have no doubt that you have thought many steps ahead. So if he does step down, if he is fired for cause, President Trump has a lot of economic outside the box thinkers in his administration. Scott Bessent, Peter Navarro, Kevin Hassett, a lot of folks who subscribe to a more unconventional way of managing and growing an economy. Do you have a pick?
I don't have a particular pick, but I know Scott Bessent is doing an amazing job as Secretary of the Treasury, and honestly, his whole economic prosperity team is doing a good job. So I know President Trump. This is kind of the one point that I know President Trump knows also well. He will choose the right person for the right job for the Federal Reserve. But President Trump is no stranger to choosing someone to have multiple hats. You see Secretary Rubio as Secretary of State, also National Security Advisor. Plus, I think he's the archivist too. So President is making sure he's putting all these people to work. And so whoever he chooses, whether it's in the administration or coming from outside the administration, it's important to know that they have the ideas, this new way of thinking, because the Federal Reserve for so long has been operating completely in a vacuum. I know it's independent, but we're entering this new era with crypto, with so much of this financial institutions happening here in the United States, where we're entering a new era. We need to make sure we have a Federal Reserve Chairman who understands this moment that we are entering. And so whether it comes from the outside or in the inside of the administration, I know President Trump's gonna have a great selection, because he wants Jerome Powell out. He says he's too late. And, he was trying to give him time, by the way, John. I mean, me calling for his resignation, this isn't a spur of the moment thing. We gave him an opportunity. Now it's 6-7 months into President Trump's second term here. And unfortunately, what we see now with the chairman is he seems to be stifling growth, and the growth that we desperately need as Americans.
So important. Sir, before we let you go, today the Supreme Court strengthened Donald Trump's hand in shrinking government, getting wasteful spending under control, clearing the way for the dismantling of the Education Department, to shrink it down. The second or third or fourth big consecutive ruling that gives the president the power to reshape government. Your thoughts on that today and what it might do for the budget a few years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know the Department of Education has been a complete disaster since its founding 50 some odd years ago. So shrinking the size of the Department of Education, eventually dismantling, has been always the goal for basically every single Republican president, at least on the campaign trail. And then once they get in office, they haven't been able to achieve that. President Trump with Secretary McMahon, they've been doing a spectacular job fighting it in the courts. And luckily, the Supreme Court has ruled in favor, not just on this, but on so many other ones as well. So it seems like we have the momentum on our side. And I want people to understand that this is not going to hinder education. It's actually going to unleash our education standards, because for so long we've been seeing that these states, they've had collapsing math scores, collapsing English scores, collapsing arithmetic scores. So it's quite pathetic that one of the strongest, most powerful countries in the world is doing abysmal in terms of education. So we need to make sure that the states are given the power and ability and the grant funding to be able to actually educate the students that they know best through direct access with the school boards.
Huge.
Spot on, as always. Congressman Abe Hamadeh from the great state of Arizona. Thank you so much for being here with us, sir.
Yeah, great guess.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, John.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Plenty more on government accountability coming up after these messages.
Hey, folks, if you're a homeowner like me, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles, and your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. And that's when the problems begin, because they start taking out loans using your equity and even sell your property. And you're not even going to find out it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice months later. That's a nightmare, right? So when's the last time you checked on your home title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never, right? You need to do something about that right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com, and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes that might happen, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's a good deal. Find out why I trust Home Title Lock. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN. Welcome back, America. You know this next guest for the extraordinary role he played in creating the Empower Oversight Whistleblower Center, the center that gave us the IRS whistleblowers, the FBI whistleblowers. But in an earlier life, I knew Jason Foster as the Chief Investigative Counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it was there that he discovered the classified annex that the Inspector General of the Justice Department had written about the Hillary Clinton email scandal. It is now at the heart of this conspiracy investigation the FBI is looking at. We're very lucky to be joined by Jason today. Jason, good to have you back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.
All right, so you're you're the senior investigative counsel for Senate Judiciary. You're working for Chuck Grassley, and you find out there's this classified annex that suggests that there was intelligence that came in about Hillary Clinton and Loretta Lynch, and the FBI never investigated on it. Tell us what you thought when you first heard about it.
Well, so this was in late summer, early fall of 2018. It was right toward the end of my time with Senator Grassley's office. And of course, there were all the public hearings when the Inspector General's report came out on the whole Hillary Clinton email mess. And a couple weeks after those public hearings, there was this classified annex that came up to Capitol Hill. And of course, I can't talk about what's in it. I posted on X about it a little earlier today, not about the substance or the content, but sort of about the procedure of what happened when that came in, and trying to help people understand the process of what happened with getting the senators briefed up on it. So after Michael Horowitz had testified before the various committees in the House and Senate about that big, high profile report, we dug into the classified annex and the law enforcement sensitive annex, and we asked him to come up and do a briefing. And we set up a bipartisan briefing with various senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee, folks from both sides. And what I posted earlier today was just about what a remarkable experience that was. Is one of the most memorable things in all of my 22 years on Capitol Hill. You know, we had very prominent Democrat and Republican senators come in, and the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, came in and he briefed them on the contents of that classified annex. And there was universal agreement in the room of a sort that I really hadn't seen before across the aisle, that, you know, hey, we don't understand why the FBI didn't investigate this information further. And it absolutely needs to be investigated further. You know, maybe I'm naive, but, you know, I nothing ever happened. You know, as far as I know, there wasn't a lot of follow up after that briefing. Yeah. But, you know, I was pleasantly surprised that the Democrats in the room were, you know, recognized the seriousness of the issue and recognized that it needed to have some further follow up and investigation. And I sort of sat and watched their, you know, as they heard from the Inspector General about why he couldn't, because it involved other intelligence agencies that were outside of his jurisdiction, and you know, a full review wouldn't be possible, and it was sort of tangentially related to his main work in the email investigation. And so I suggested, you know, well, why don't you do a joint project and investigate it with the Inspector General of the intelligence community, because he would have jurisdiction over all of it. Right. You guys could get to all the witnesses you need to, and it seems like the senators here want to know a lot more about what happened here. There's universal bipartisan agreement that we need to know more, and the senators in the room agreed with me. And you know, but I left shortly after that. I left Capitol Hill for the private sector for a while before starting in Power Oversight, and you know, so I'm sort of not privy to anything that happened after that in terms of any follow-up that might, you know, I've seen news reporting about my former boss, Senator Grassley, has been pressing to get this thing declassified and has been pressing for answers from the FBI. But, you know, one of the things I did before I left was I tried to get a briefing from the FBI to answer, you know, hey, here's what the OIG says you guys did not look into. Why didn't you look into it? And I wasn't able to get that, you know, before I left. So I don't, you know, I'm sure that there's been briefings to my former office, to my former boss, but I'm not privy to them.
Yeah. Jason, so that was 2018. So that was a few years into what President Trump would refer to as Trump derangement syndrome. Fast forward 7 years to where we are now. If you were serving as lead investigator for a House or a Senate committee, and you brought a bipartisan group of people together and showed them the same type of egregious evidence that one party was protected and another party was targeted, do you think you would get the same reaction now?
I don't know. I mean, I was surprised because it was, you know, they weren't doing it for the cameras. They weren't doing it for show, right? It was a private meeting. They seem to genuinely be concerned on both sides of the aisle. And, you know, again, maybe I'm naive in thinking that. Maybe they were just saying what they thought was a good look for the Inspector General to hear them say. And, you know, as far as I know, there hasn't been any actual substantive follow-up after that, other than Senator Grassley's efforts that have been publicly reported. But, you know, I don't know. Things were getting pretty bad in terms of partisanship before I left, and they seem to have only gotten worse. So, you know, maybe they wouldn't have the same sort of honest reaction that they did.
Yeah. Jason, I want to ask a little bit about the pattern that's at the heart of what Kash Patel did. So we've confirmed that Kash Patel is looking at the last 10 years as sort of an ongoing conspiracy to protect Democrats who might have engaged in wrongdoing, Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and then foist onto Republicans investigations that might not be warranted, such as what happened to Mike Flynn or Carter Page or Donald Trump. That sort of wash, rinse, repeat cycle, when you look at it as a lawyer, can you see the possibility of grand jury looking at it and saying, I might see a conspiracy here?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, you'd have to gather the evidence and make the case. But I mean, I'll make an analogy to this classified annex to something else that people may be familiar with, which is the 1023, the Biden bribe allegations that Senator Grassley got from an FBI whistleblower and put out because it's a similar, there is a similar pattern there. When there's something that looks like that most people would look at and say, wow, if this has any credibility at all, it really needs to be investigated to the hilt, and we need to figure out, we need to get to the bottom of this. If the way the bias creeps in is you just don't look into the things that you think where you don't want to know the answers, right? And so like with the Biden bribe allegations, they buried it for years and years, hid it from our IRS whistleblower clients who were doing the Hunter Biden investigation on the tax issues, even though it was absolutely relevant to their investigation, but the FBI and DOJ hid it from them for years. And so I think this other, this classified annex on the Clinton email investigation is a similar sort of thing. There's information there that objectively anybody looking at it fairly would say, wow, we really need to look into that. But because I think some people were scared of what they might find if they did look into it further, there was a see no evil, hear no evil attitude. Whereas on the other hand, you contrast that with how they dealt with the Steele dossier, which as soon as that was public, a lot of people just reading it, any sophisticated person reading it at the time, could see that it was likely to be bunk. It was sort of crazy. And yet that was the center of, a 3-year hysteria and had to be, investigated for years and years, millions of dollars spent by Mueller, hundreds and hundreds of grand jury witnesses and subpoenas and millions of dollars. And, it's just, that's where you see the disparate treatment. And you see that if it's on one side, if they think the ox is going to be gored on one side, then they're not interested. But if they think it's going to go after the other side, then they're really, really interested.
Jason, before we let you go, I want to ask you, courage is not exactly contagious among government workers, but there were a number of courageous people, Gary Shapler, Joseph Ziegler. I want to ask you about the state of the cases for the IRS whistleblowers and the FBI whistleblowers.
Yeah, well, we've actually seen some cracks in the ice on our FBI whistleblower clients. On our IRS clients, the Treasury Secretary brought them in, gave them promotions in an unprecedented way. And so there's already been some measure of justice for them. But our FBI whistleblowers are still, many of them are still suspended without pay indefinitely and have lost their security clearances. We are, however, in fact, earlier today, I had a conversation. We had a meeting with the FBI, had a conversation with them, and we are in active settlement talks. And the ice seems to be breaking a little bit. I can't get into the details of that, obviously, but there are rays of hope on the horizon that we might get some resolution. We have 10 clients, only some of whom are public, right? And that we're trying to get some justice for. And I wrote to the FBI about them last March, and we're finally seeming to get a little bit of traction on those. So
that's great. Important for the future of whistleblowing. That's great. Jason, you do such amazing work, whether it's discovering the classified annex and getting those senators in the room or protecting whistleblowers for very important revelations. Great honor to have you on the show tonight, my friend. Thanks so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, one of my favorite medical experts, Dr. Peter McCullough, will be here. We're going to discuss all the things that are going on, including Pam Bondi's decision last week to drop charges against a doctor who was against the COVID vaccine. We'll have all that right after these messages.
Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. If you can't tell, there has been a theme to the show tonight, and it is government accountability. But what about when it comes to COVID? We now know more about the extent to which the Biden administration used an auto pen to sign pardons, for example, Dr. Fauci's. And we also now know that Attorney General Pam Bondi has taken at least one step to right the wrongs done during the pandemic, dropping charges against Dr. Kirk Moore, who says he was wrongfully prosecuted for upholding medical ethics around the vaccine mandates. So joining us now to talk about all of that, he is world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer at the Wellness Company. He's also the author of his new book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's dive straight into that book, because there's a lot of information swirling about around vaccines, especially for my generation. The COVID vaccine was what broke the dam when it came to just being skeptical about vaccines. Tell us about your book.
Boy, if you were around in the early 19th century or even early 20th centuries, and the issue of the day was smallpox or pertussis or polio, you would have found characters very similar to Anthony Fauci, including Edward Jenner and Louis Pasteur. Our research showed that, in fact, vaccines for the longest time have had a hubris about them. Lots of money, lots of fear campaigns, coercion, and sadly, vaccines not living up to what they've been sold to the population. So you've got to get a copy of the book. There really is, in a sense, a mythology and a vaccine religion that doctors and others now have followed. It's irrational and explains so much of what we've seen with COVID-19 vaccines.
Yeah, no doubt. That's going to be a must read. So I want to stay on the subject for a second, because last week the federal government approved for some children, people who have vulnerabilities, to continue getting the COVID vaccine. Young people, particularly at risk of the heart inflammation that they've now acknowledged existed during the entire COVID vaccination program. Your thoughts on that recommendation? Did it concern you?
It's reckless. I'm a cardiologist. Let me tell you, let's say a child with Down syndrome who has congenital heart disease. This is the last thing you'd want that child to take, a vaccine that causes heart damage. If the heart is already weakened or it's already had surgery, it's far more likely to have consequences of the myocarditis, including heart failure or cardiac arrest. The FDA just rubber stamped these through, and they promised there was going to be large prospective clinical trials. None of that was done, and now America is furious at this most recent approval.
All right, let's stay on that for a moment, because Dr. Kirk Moore, the case against him has been dropped. This is a doctor who, in line with his medical ethics, felt, I think he did some disposing of vaccines and maybe injected saline instead. Case dropped. Is this a step in the right direction towards medical freedom?
It's the justice that we all wanted to see, and great credit to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tom Massey, Shannon Joy, and actually all the health freedom heroes that really got on the scene there. What we learned is this doctor gave patients a choice. They had informed consent, and he disposed of some vaccines. Do you know the United States government has dumped millions of doses down the drain because people don't want these vaccines?
Yeah, so remarkable. As you look out now and you see with the story in the New York Times this weekend about Joe Biden using the auto pen for Dr. Fauci's investigation, or for his pardon, and now you got Senator Rand Paul wants to resubmit now, based on that evidence, the criminal referral on Dr. Fauci. Do you think that Fauci's tenure and his actual decision-making will get another look at the Justice Department, or has that water already passed the bridge?
No, we need the referral, a special prosecutor assigned. And it looks like now that Fauci probably approached Biden in this neurologically compromised state and asked for this 10-year pardon because Fauci knew he committed crimes of fraud. That is, he deceived the country on multiple levels. And his work, suppression of treatment and pushing the vaccines, resulted in mass negligent homicide.
Jarring. Before we let you go, I am still hearing about measles cases. Are we getting to a concerning number yet? Should we be frightened?
Worldwide, some years there's 600,000 measles cases. Last year in Europe, there was over 200,000 cases. So if we're at 1,200 in the United States, not concerned at all. There's always going to be some cases of measles. And they occur in both those who've taken the vaccines and those who are unvaccinated. What people need to do is understand how to treat measles using, all the techniques that we have, and stop worrying about this. Worldwide, 600,000 cases, and we're making a big deal of 1,200 in the United States.
Yeah, good point.
Dr. Peter McCullough, always bringing the reality, like it says in your book title, world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer over at the Wellness Company. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And to our audience, a thank you to all of you. You can go to twc.health/justnews today and use the code JUSTNEWS to save 10% on any order from the Wellness Company. That is twc.health/justnews, and use promo code JUSTNEWS to save 10%. All right, some final thoughts on the other side of this break. Welcome back, everybody. It is our final segment of the night. And John, we've got a lot of Epstein topics in the rundown. Yeah. And, just looking at the chatter online over the weekend, people are still very, very inflamed and enraged over this. And we'll see what happens. But
just a little bit ago, just happened a few minutes ago, Pam Bondi responded to Giselle Maxwell's appeal, saying the Supreme Court should not take up this case, that the sentence is worthy of her crime and not to waste time with the Supreme Court. That's an interesting twist. It's not going to solve the problem, which is that we haven't been transparent. We, the American people, haven't been given a transparent accounting. What document exists? What did you release? Not what you release. The trust us don't work it. You got to give us a list of the documents. Create a Vaughn index.
Yeah.
Let us see that. And there's another place that we don't talk about very often, and that is the grand jury.
Yeah.
FBI would not have those documents, but Pam Bondi and the DOJ would know what the Southern District of New York was gathering by grand jury. They should unseal those and let the American people see that.
Yeah. Well, Ghislaine
not
Maxwell
hard.
seems like she's ready to talk anyway.
Yeah. I mean, is she credible? I don't know. I mean, she obviously enabled
That
a
is the question.
pretty significant child prostitution scheme. But whatever the case, who is credible? It's people like the lawyers. They can tell us a lot
Sure.
too. We're trying to get the lawyers to come on the show. There's new things to be learned, and we're not going to stop trying to get those documents here.
I think,
Just to use
yeah,
America's voice. We're
the
gonna
drumbeat will roll on. And
Yeah.
President Trump's own daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, seems to think that this is not the end for the Trump administration, despite what is being outwardly said at this point.
Yeah, no, listen, this is a temporary blip. I saw more chatter today about focusing on this conspiracy case and what it may mean for accountability that people wanted than the Epstein files. But it's not, listen, the Epstein files was a self-made crisis by Pam Bondi, and she has to find a way to get out of it. I think the fastest way is just be transparent. Here is what we have. Here's what we release. Here's what we're not releasing, why we're not releasing it. Here's what the grand jury had. Here's what the state had. And here's what the CIA had, because the CIA has a file on Epstein. I don't think it's significant, but get it all out there. I
Absolutely.
think President Trump would approve any release if they just got it done.
I absolutely think he would too. All right, let's switch gears to the economy. Someone
Yeah.
who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, Kevin Hassett,
Yeah.
because I think he is
Yeah,
one of
no,
the best
it's-
educators and messengers for President Trump's
Yeah.
economic policy,
Yep.
says that tariffs will raise $3 trillion in revenue over the next decade.
Yep.
That is not nothing.
No, that's $300 to $400 billion a year. That brings the deficit down. So Trump's cuts will get it down to 1.7, 1.8. Now you're down to 1.5, 1.4. And with these decisions by the Supreme Court, the true rescissions are Trump's authority not to have to go to Congress and cut jobs as he sees fit, as long as he certifies that what he's doing is what Congress wants. I think you could see one of the leaner, in the out years of the Trump presidency, 27, 28, and then the first year he hands off to a new president,
Yep.
I think you can see deficits below $1 trillion, which is something we haven't seen in the last 15 years. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, the rescissions are a very interesting way to just claw back that money
Yeah.
for the American people.
And it's easy. Should be
Speaking of
doable.
tariff revenue, President
Yeah.
Trump has threatened 100% tariffs
Oh,
on
yeah.
Russia if they don't reach a deal in 50 days. Do you think that Putin's paying attention?
This will make them pay attention. And if the sanctions that the president's talking about include sanctioning the Russian central bank, it will paralyze the Russian economy. We've always talked about that as a nuclear option. But if almost everything in Russia has to go to the Russian central bank in order to access it because of the way the legacy from their communist era. You sanction that bank, you have crippled Russia, you're creating bread lines. That will have Putin's attention. And it's a reminder, President Trump tried. It was very friendly to Putin at the beginning, but when Putin didn't engage, Donald Trump could be on the bad side of this deal, be really tough, and Russia could be paid a dear price. I suspect China and Russia are talking right now because, China, if these sanctions occur, China can't do business and get its oil from Russia.
That's right.
That's a problem for China. So my guess is there are more than one country in the back of this talk right
I
now.
think that's exactly right. All right, so an Iranian group claims to have raised $40 million in reward money to assassinate President Trump. We know they've had plots in the past, for sure.
Some great work by the Foundations for Defense of Democracy and MEMRI, Middle East Research Council. This is really disturbing. It's not surprising because we know that Iran tried to last year send someone to kill Trump. But the fact that it's so overt and it has been barely condemned, except for these two think tanks who brought it to our attention, it does say something about Trump derangement syndrome, which may be a global phenomenon, not just an American phenomenon.
Indeed, indeed. All right, let's squeeze in one more. Andrew
Sure.
Cuomo is going to stay in the race. He's going to run as a third-party candidate
Yeah.
to try to challenge Mamdani.
Yep.
Mamdani.
Yeah, he splits the independent vote. I mean,
I know.
If there's any chance of knocking Mamdani off, you got to get the other side down to one candidate.
galvanize
Is it
everybody
Eric
behind
Adams? Is it Andrew Cuomo? We'll see.
Yeah. All right, everybody. That is all the time that we have for you tonight. We have a very packed show for you tomorrow night already, so make sure you tune in right here at 6 p.m. Eastern. Everybody, head over to justthenews.com. Again, check out John's incredible article, all of the reporting that he has done about this 10-year overarching conspiracy. Go check it out. Grant Stinchfield is going to